our very favorite guest, Siri Strommen, is here today. She is the pastor of Atonement Lutheran Church in Bloomington, Minnesota. Welcome, Siri.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Okay, so I told Siri this isn't going to be a long one, but I felt it was really important to get this out with this really pivotal election this Tuesday. And that's really not hyperbole or an overstatement. We are literally going to choose between democracy and a dictatorship. We are choosing between women's autonomy, their rights over their own body, or going back to a time when men were the rulers of the women in their lives and they obeyed. So anyway, so this is what I wanted to talk to Siri about, because the thing that it's not new, but is the thing I find the most astounding is the marriage of religion and this cruelty and this right-wing ideology. And I've said this before, I come from a very religious background. I was raised Roman Catholic and taught Catholicism as I got older. I went to church every day of the week, went to confession. Raised in the Catholic Church, was a very, very religious person my whole life. I was seeking answers, and that's where I was taught and trained to look. And through a series of experiences in my mid-30s, my soul just called me out of traditional religion. But I can tell you from my religion and from pretty much most religions, except Siri's, which is interesting to me, which is why I'm glad you're here. Siri is in a traditional religion. Lutheran is a traditional religion, but the practice is very, in my opinion, non-traditional. Might be traditional for Lutherans, but definitely not Catholic. But I never felt a warm acceptance, connection with this God that I was told loved me more than anything, but had a lot of rules I was supposed to follow. And if I didn't follow them, there would be a lot of punishment. And the nuns and the priests all backed this up, that they were the representatives of God in our life. They told us what God liked, what didn't like, how we had to behave to earn our way to heaven. And if we didn't do that, fires of hell and damnation forever. And as much as I tried, as long as I searched to ease this aching in my soul for some kind of divine connection, I never felt much more than fear, to be quite honest. I had moments, on retreats or wherever, but there was always underneath that fear. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be good enough. I think I told you this once before, Siri. It breaks my heart when I think of all of my life that was wasted performing for a God that doesn't even exist. I'm not saying there's not a higher power. I'm not saying there's not a divine being. I am saying this God that religion has rammed down our throats does not exist. This hateful, vengeful, male God with all these rules. And this is where I want to dovetail into what's happening around us. How religion, Christianity, I'll stick with Christianity. I don't know a lot about other religions, but in Christianity, how they have married this hateful, racist, misogynist, cruel bully to their God, to me, is the most glaring example of how religion has it all wrong and is basically just a tool to control people and keep them in line and small and keep them in power. And when I say them in power, Catholic Church, once again, one of the largest holders of real estate in the world. Nobody even really knows how many billions they have because they don't have to file taxes. They're a 501c3, they're a religious organization, but they have their own bank, they have their own city. And in the meantime, all their parishes that they're closing, they're having bake sales and car washes to try and keep the children in their good Catholic school. It makes me want to vomit. I am so fed up with it. And I'm tired of seeing these people who call themselves patriots talk about how they are representatives for God and that they are doing the patriotic, God-given rightful thing. God is on our side. And I'm really angry right now. I'm so sick of them, but I understand it because they were raised with an angry God who rejected them unless they behaved a certain way, who was filled with judgment. So of course, they are going to believe that this hateful man filled with judgment, it doesn't shock them. Now, anyone who has had any kind of direct experience with the divine, anyone who's had a near-death experience, there's millions of them. You can go on YouTube and watch them. Nobody has experienced this kind of divine being that religion has rammed down people's throats. They experience unconditional love and acceptance and non-judgment and joy and all these wonderful, wonderful feelings. But that doesn't work for the churches who are making billions off of their congregations by keeping them small, suffering, keeping their butts in those pews every week, putting that money in that basket. So that doesn't work. So I do understand how people can believe that there is a God, that this guy, this sexual predator, which is what he is, a convicted sexual predator, is a representative of God because their God is so scary. I know that God. I was raised with that God, and he scared the hell out of me. And I was always trying to be good enough for him to love and do good things for. And it's not a fairy tale. It's a horror tale. There is no truth in it whatsoever. And how they call themselves Christians, when a Christian is someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ, and they follow none of them. None of them. They don't welcome the poor. They don't give health care to the sick. They don't feed the hungry children. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing how well people, it's like little birds with the mother bird. They just open their mouths and swallow it all. Bypasses the brain. They don't stop and ask, how could there be someone who created me, but then I got to fix all this stuff about me. And if I do this, he's going to send me to hell and make me burn there forever. It doesn't make sense, which is how the path out of religion led me to start asking questions. No wonder they want you to have blind faith. You'd have to be blind to believe this stuff. And I was blind for a long time. But when I followed my soul and discovered this divinity, this source that is what we're all aching for, what we're all searching for, and is nothing like that controlling, judgmental God. And I lay this at religion's feet, and it's not an accident. It's not, they don't want you tipping the apple cart. And the most important thing is the women. And it's very interesting to me. I don't know if you saw this, but the Taliban has now made it illegal for women to even speak to each other.
Right.
From head to toe, can't see them. You cannot see them. And now they have no voice.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if any of the people following these things, if any women at all, the women voting for this man who has already started taking rights away from women, this party, I should say, it's not just him, and it's the people that follow him as well, has ever stopped to ask themselves, why are they coming after women? Why is it when men get in power, the first thing they want to do is control women, control our bodies, control our sex lives, because it behooves them to keep us in our servitude mode. And what do they use to do that? God. It's not us. It's God. Look at this holy book. It's written in there that you females are born to serve humanity. And oh, you should be so grateful and thankful for this honor and privilege of being the handmaiden to everyone in your life. What a privilege. And when you get to heaven, God's going to pat you on the head and give you a big mansion. Oh my God, what a crock. We bought it. I bought it. And I'm really angry right now. I'm saying stuff that offends people. I'm sorry. But there's too much on the line. And it's such a blatant lie. And anyone who has ever experienced a fraction of the truth, which I believe we know a pinprick of the truth of what actually this all is and what the meaning of it is. But anyone who's ever experienced even a moment of divine connection. It's like someone throwing a bucket of cold water on you, and you're like, wait a minute, what? This is the truth? I'm loved beyond anything I can imagine. I'm not going to be judged. I'm worthy. There's nothing I have to atone for. There's no sin on my soul. All this stuff that keeps us weighted down and small and obedient, especially women. You know, we got the whole apple thing because, God created man first and then switched it up. That makes sense, right? This divine being is like, I'm going to have man give birth to women. And then for the rest of eternity, women are going to be the ones who give birth. I kind of think that story might have been fudged a little too.
Yeah.
Just so tired of it. But this is what I want to say is on the line here with the doctors. I just want to say this because I want these women and anyone who hasn't voted yet to please keep this in mind. What is happening to women? It's not about you being such a good Christian and saving the babies for Jesus. That's a lie in your soul. There's not an ounce of truth to it. It is about controlling women, keeping them in their place, and keeping the men in power in power. So in the states, Texas, Alabama, I think there 11 states that have passed the abortion bans. I want to just name a few of these women and what's happening to women. Because of these people who say God wants them to do this. Tamara Costa was pregnant with her second child, and the fetus had no skull, and all the organs were developing outside of the fetus's body. She had to travel 600 miles to Chicago in order to abort that fetus because she lived in a state with no access to abortion. She survived. 19-year-old Nevia Crane. There's an article of this in ProPublica this week. She was crying in pain. She went to 3 emergency rooms. She was at her baby shower. Her mother was throwing her baby shower. She was in so much pain. She took her to the emergency room. They said she had strep throat. Didn't even bother with the abdominal pain she was having, sent her home. Second emergency room visit, she couldn't walk. She was bleeding, crying in pain. And they said she had sepsis, but the fetus still had a heartbeat. So they sent her home. The third trip to the emergency room, unfortunately, they did 2 ultrasounds to make sure the fetus had no heartbeat. And when it finally didn't, they started treating her and she was in ICU and died 3 hours later. And I had one more. Where did it go? Oh, Jessica Baruka. No, Jocelyn, sorry, Jossel. Jocelyn Baruka died of sepsis because doctors waited 40 hours for the fetal heartbeat to stop before they would abort her pregnancy. And this is what is happening. It's not about women. It's not about life. It's about controlling women and keeping the status quo. If you honestly believe there's a God in heaven who's going to reward you for allowing these women to die because they had to wait till a clump of cells or a fetus that wasn't viable outside of their bodies died first, what does that tell you about what they think about women? That this baby that can't live without her, can't survive without her, some of them can't survive at all, no matter what, how long they carry them, that baby has more rights and that life is more valued than the mother that's carrying that baby. And this is what we are voting about Tuesday. All these women that came before us that fought and bled and died and spent prison time trying to fight for our rights, for voting rights, for autonomy over our own bodies, for equality. With one fell swoop, you can vote on Tuesday and take us back 100 years, or you can finally find it within you. I don't care what your religion has told you. I don't care what the men around you have told you. If it doesn't support your sovereignty, your right to make your own decisions, your ability to believe whatever it is you want to believe, it's not something that's supporting you. It's something that's trying to keep you controllable. Okay, with that, Siri, as I said, she's a pastor. She's a Lutheran pastor, but she is not in any kind of tradition like my hardcore religions or the Baptist religion. And one other thing with these religions, just remember the KKK, those guys put on their hoods, hung human beings from trees on Saturday night, took their hoods off and showed up in church in the front pew on Sundays. So
Yep.
your religion can go right here as far as I'm concerned. Just because you're at church every Sunday means nothing regarding your morality and your heart. Okay.
Yep.
Take it away, Siri.
Yeah, I just kept thinking of like all the different strands of where I could go. But I think one of the things I've never really shared in the videos I've done is, just sort of my story in that I grew up lucky, and my dad was a Lutheran pastor, and my grandfather and several of my uncles were Lutheran pastors. And I really saw the best side of religion growing up. I saw like my dad was very gentle, and he was grace, grace, grace was what we talked about. And when I asked questions, questions were encouraged. When I said at 8 years old that I wanted to be a pastor, no one said that I couldn't because I was a girl. No one said that. Like it wasn't even a thing. My mom was a feminist, and so by default, my dad was too. And it was just sort of a gentle family. And it wasn't until I got older and started to be in contact with other people that I started to realize that there were other faces of religion, and people were having experiences very different than mine. And the more I had conversations with people, the more I was like passionate. I wanted to go to seminary because I wanted people to know that the God that some people experienced was not the real God. And maybe that sounds strange because like who defines what the real God is, but the truth is that in a lot of the religious groups that are very high control, where God is very judgmental and there's a lot of laws, one of the things they do is disconnect you from your own intuition and your own personal experience of God. So the only thing you know and have are ideas and beliefs about God that are fed to you by like a chain of command that is almost always just male. And it is 2,000 years, or rather 1,700 years of male interpretation and male dominated points of view. And you can trace that. You can trace the theology as being that of domination, control, demonizing the earth, demonizing bodies, demonizing and taking God out of our souls, out of our bodies, and externalizing. And that this was not the only form of Christianity. The major belief that a lot of people have, especially in evangelical beliefs, is you think that's the only kind of Christianity that ever was. And that's absolutely not true. There were gentler, more collaborative, egalitarian Christianities in the first few hundred years that believed that all living things, humans, animals, all living things were the reflection of God and held the sacredness of God, and it was honored. But that didn't fit the agenda of those in power. When power started to happen, the women were no longer invited to the table, and things started to get doctored and shifted and changed. We have evidence that parts of the Bible were shifted because there's so many different scrolls from different periods of time. There isn't just like one Bible, right? There isn't one strain that's sort of this unadulterated thing. It's way more complicated than that. And you can actually see where things were shifted and changed, and scribes changed things to reflect a more dominant and masculine point of view. And slowly this perpetuated itself, and we've seen the harm that's been done. We've seen how that's hurt people. And there have been strands always, always on the fringes. There have been Christians who have done beautiful things, who've built schools and orphanages and hospitals, who've tended to everybody, who've reached out across religious lines and gender and race. There's always been those people, but they've always sort of been on these fringes. And they've always existed. So we can never just whitewash and say, all people who belong to this are bad, right? That's just not fair, and it's not realistic. But they're not the ones who are in power, and often power tries to silence them. I will say that, in my Lutheran tradition, we just yesterday on October 31st celebrated, it's about 500 years since Martin Luther did the whole Reformation. And as a Lutheran pastor, one of the things I struggle with is like, we're not done yet. He had really good ideas, but they're 500 years old. And there are some things that desperately need to change in this church today, because still there's so much of the patriarchy and so much of the perspectives that we've been taught about the Bible and about exporting our power that seem to still linger everywhere. And there is a whole, I don't know how to say this, but there's just so much more. When people have those direct experiences of God, like what you talked about, they get like something bigger and more beautiful, and that has yet to kind of infiltrate the church fully. And that's what I'm passionate about, is seeing what is unhealthy and what is toxic in our church, naming it, and bringing in and empowering people to think for themselves, to experience God for themselves, to have conversations about that, to feel like you're not wrong if you're talking with in other ideas and other with other kinds of people, right? And as I look at this election, it's really interesting how we have these archetypes between our two candidates. Like, Kamala Harris is imperfect. No, there is no perfect, okay? There's no perfect. There's no utopia that's going to be made on Earth. It's sort of the archetype of what we're seeing. And one really does seem to be this old, bullish, doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how competent you are. You act strong, you be tough, you punch people, you make fun of people, and people think you're strong. You use religion to back your power up in a very disingenuous way. And this to me represents what we've been seeing in leaders for the last thousands and thousands of years. Just how many wars have been started by complete idiots, just power hungry, stupid bullies who had commanded armies about the dumbest stuff. You know, it's everywhere. Our history books are literally filled with men fighting, fighting, fighting. I thought that's what history was. That's what men created and decided was history. We never hear about, you never read in history books about what women were doing and other little things. It's just sort of men and their agendas. And that has been called to question. In the last 50 years, there's been like this increasing energy of more and more people going, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. And they're calling to question these old structures of power. And they are coming back with all vengeance, right? But the other way forward is a way that's more collaborative, a way that's more unitive, a way that involves people of color and women and marginalized people having a voice at the table and thinking of new ways and new pathways forward. Again, I am not saying that Kamala Harris is like the perfect person or the answer, right? I'm talking about like archetypes and what's being represented. And there's so much work our country needs to do to be better, so much. But I definitely can feel that there's like this two ways of seeing the world that are clashing. And there's been so much pressure for people who've been in religion to be told what to think and to be manipulated. And, just even what you said about abortion, I sort of grew up being pro-life because that's what you did, right? And it was when I actually started to like listen and open my mind that I started to realize it's not as simple as they want you to believe. They want you to think it's all about the babies, the sweet little babies, and these mean, nasty, sluts who go off and just like screw every guy they can think of, don't care about whatever, tempt these poor men, whatever it is, sleep around, and then go, oh, I'll just use a bunch of abortion for my birth control for the rest of my life. That is bullshit. It is so misogynistic. It's not the truth. That is what you're being taught. We have slut shamed the crap out of women for thousands of years. And the only way we look at this we look at this whole abortion issue as being a slut shaming, and we don't even know that's what it is. When in reality, it's so much more complex than that. Um, After my first child was born, when he was about 10 months old, um, I thought I was having my period. I started bleeding and I thought I was cramping and bloated. It was different from anything I'd experienced, but I didn't know any different until I walked up the stairs and I fainted. And I've never fainted in my entire life. So my husband took me to the hospital and we found out I had an ectopic pregnancy,
Mm.
which is an egg growing in your fallopian tubes and it will not move. That's where it is. So it bursts the fallopian tubes and you bleed until you die. That's just what it is. You bleed until you die. There's no saving anything without surgery. And so I met with this woman surgeon and she's like, if we can save that little egg, do you want me to? And I'm like, yes. Um, wasn't planning on it, but I was like, yeah, why not? It wasn't possible. I had the surgery, and it is just like in the last year that I realized Republicans want to call that life-saving surgery I had an abortion.
Mhm.
And fine, I had an abortion then. I'll claim it. I was a married woman who had one child and wanted to have another, and I would have died without that surgery. And there would not be my second child. I wouldn't exist, and my second child wouldn't exist. Those are the stories we need to be talking about. That's what's at stake. And so this manipulation of power of just saying, let's find that one cause that we can make as black and white as possible, and then show you pictures of embryos and fetuses and just clue you into the fact, remember that women who would choose this are just a bunch of sluts whose life is not worth it. That's what we want you to think of. Easy peasy. Choose the babies, hang the sluts, and everything will be fine. And that's just genuinely how I view the whole pro-choice, pro-life thing. I didn't want an abortion. Most women who get them don't want them. But there are times in which it's necessary in order for life to continue. And if you think God is such an asshole as to not understand what's going on earth, it's what an uncompassionate God. And what scarcity to think that like this little thing that's not viable anyway, or isn't even very fair along is its only shot at life. Like, come on, do you think God is that? I don't know. So there you go. That's my rant. You
Mhm.
got yours and I got mine in.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up quickly, but before we do, I'm gonna make my pitch to women and maybe some men who maybe haven't decided yet, or hopefully will change their vote if they're voting for enslavement of themselves. I do want to say one thing. Um, Thank you for sharing that about your abortion. Also, though, it's okay if you got an abortion because you had a one-night stand and you're not ready to be a mother. It's okay. What
Right.
this is about is autonomy over your own
Yes.
body, and men not
Yes.
regulating, because this thing about purity and virginity, and they
Yes.
all want to stick their dicks in everything that moves, but they want to
Yes.
marry a virgin. It's
Yep.
it's nuts. And I know
Yes.
I'm talking in sweeping generalities. Yes, I know not all men, and I know this isn't true for everybody, but I'm pretty fired up. I mean, which we should be. God, I wish women would
Yes.
stop being ashamed of their anger. We need our anger sometimes, and it's so trained out of us that when we need access to it, when we're being assaulted or when our rights are being taken away, we're like zombies, because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, anger. Oh, gosh.
And
Oh, I feel bad.
thank
I
you,
raised
Mary,
my
for like,
voice. Sorry,
thank you,
what?
Mary. Yeah, thank you for saying, like, I want to be clear too that I think the word slut is bullshit. Like, we only call women sluts. We don't call men sluts. So this is a completely invented word too. And yes, women get to choose what they want to do with their body. And we shouldn't be ashamed of our sexuality either. And women nor children should bear the responsibility of something, you know, one night, right? Men don't have to bear that responsibility. And how many kids grow up in homes where they're not wanted or they're not treated well? You want more of that? That's cruelty. That's child abuse. It is abusing the woman and her body and her life, and you're forcing a child to live that may have potentially a very difficult life with absolutely no support from, you know, the community. So yeah, I agree. Like, my case of being a married woman is one thing, but I appreciate you bringing up, because in no way do I want to demonize unmarried women or all of the other stories. It's all part of the lie.
I
It's
know,
all,
and I know you didn't. That's why I brought up, because I know
yeah.
that you don't think that way. So, okay, so here's my appeal to those who have not voted yet, will be voting. Um, so when you're choosing to vote for this man and that party that has advocated for you to have your rights taken away, when you listen to this man call people's names, what did he do yesterday, today? Whenever it was, he said Liz Cheney should have 9 shotguns aimed at her face or something. That I don't know how someone gets to be 80 years old and still behaves like a 12-year-old boy. Name
Right.
calling, I'm the greatest, I'm the greatest. Look at me, everything I do is the best. That's like, you know, when you're a kid, you're like, oh God, don't pick him on our team. I don't, you know, this is not, how did this become something that's attractive to people? And again, I tie it in with that big daddy God in the sky is going to kick everybody's ass. And
Yeah.
I asked a priest about this once, and he said pretty much that's why they crucified Jesus, because they were expecting a savior that was going to get retribution and revenge. And Jesus was like, hey, forgive everyone, love everyone. You're all brothers and sisters. And they were like, forget this guy, get him out of here. Yeah. We want that mean fighting daddy Jesus. We don't want to take responsibility for ourselves and our lives. We don't want to have to stand up for ourselves. We don't want people to get mad at us. Let the daddy God do it. The daddy God president, the daddy God in the sky. Oh, it's infuriating. But I want to say to women, if you're supporting this man, you're telling an awful lot about the men in your life and how they've demonstrated what Siri said, how her father was. So she was very surprised to find out. Tells you how much dysfunction is in this country, that people have normalized a rapist, a felon, a con man. I mean, he had every business closed, right? I mean, just about everyone, Steaks and his charity and his university, all frauds, 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 had to close them all down. The fact that this misogynistic, abusive man is who you are looking to and idolizing and want to see as your president says so much about the tragic way that you have witnessed men behave in your life, that this is normal to you. And I get it. I was on your team for a long, long time. I sacrificed everything inside myself to get the approval of all those people around me, especially the men around me. And I want to say this because 1 in 3 women are sexually abused. And I believe just about all women are to some degree at some point in their life. And that is that we have normalized the sexual abuse of ourselves so much that even we don't take it into consideration. This man is an admitted, accused, and convicted sexual predator. There are dozens of women who said that he assaulted them. The Jeffrey Epstein parties, the girls that were at those parties said he was at all those parties and always wanted the girls that looked like his daughter. It's another thing. You women you have fathers. Can you imagine your father saying if you weren't his daughter, he'd be dating you? Can you imagine him being comfortable on a worldwide talk show and the host says, what do you and your daughter have in common? And you're sitting there with your daughter and you say sex. It's the first word out of your mouth. This is really sick, twisted stuff. And the fact that this did not make, especially women, run in the other direction tells you just how poisoned we have become to our own abuse, to accepting unacceptable male behavior. And if you are a man and you're aligning yourself with this man, you are telling quite a tale on yourself. You're telling quite a tale on yourself. So my greatest hope is that the next time we're together, we are celebrating the fact that the glass ceiling has finally been shattered, that we have our first female president. And I just want to say today, I did put out a video on the first, there's been a handful, like 6, 7 women throughout time who have run for president, some more seriously than others. But I focused on Victoria Woodhull, who was the first woman to ever run for president in 1838. No, yeah, I think it was 1838, something like that, 1868. Anyway, guess what they called her? Slut, whore, Satan, the devil. I mean, everything old is new again. They just pull out the same old tropes, you know, every time. That woman, guess where she was on election day in 18, whatever it was. Want to know where she was? She was in jail on morals charges because she was such a slut and whore and advocated for women's sexual freedom and their own emancipation. And I want to say Victoria Woodhull, because she wanted women's sexual freedom and financial freedom, was the first woman to open a female-owned trading firm on Wall Street. She did do that.
Wow. Wow.
She was eventually acquitted of all charges once the election was over. But anyway, and then Shirley Chisholm in 1972. God bless Shirley. She served, she was the first Black congresswoman. She served 7 terms. She was the founder of the Black Caucus. And this is so beautiful about these women. And I really want, especially women, to think about this before you vote. What these women carried you on their shoulders before you were even born, before some of you were even a thought in your mother's mind. These women were thinking of you and paving the way, because Shirley said, I knew I would not win, but I was hoping to garner enough support that I could influence the legislation for women, for Black Americans, for marginalized people. These are women whose humanity and hearts are just beyond description, so beautiful. The way that they cared and tried to push things forward for us. So I really hope before you go to vote, you think about all these women and how hard and long fought these fights have been before you so easily and carelessly vote them all away. You're up, Siri.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I guess I'd just say that, you know, the world is not black and white. And we've been taught fear and shame and guilt so much that we hardly know what it's like to be without it. And I think part of the healing of the world that women are going to start with our power and our anger and our courage is to start healing and just getting rid of all of that shame, getting rid of all that guilt, getting rid of fear. I mean, I would love at some point that if someone was just yelling at me and telling me how terrible I was and blah, 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 that I just could sit there and laugh and just be like, I don't give a crap what you think of me, because I know who I am. And I've done the work within myself to stand strong, and I'm going to use my power. And I guess here's the last thing I'll say. No matter what happens, I want to be someone who stands up, does not shut up, does not sit down, does not give away my power, will not be intimidated, and continues to speak courage and compassion and wisdom for all living things.
Amen, sister. I love that. All right. Well, we'll say goodbye for now and look forward to when we say hello again and are looking at our first elected female president. Thanks for being with us, Siri.
Thank you.